Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning. We're excited today to have Millard Smith, our land expert, to talk to us about buying vacant lots or vacant land. Millard has a vacant land contract that he wants to go over with you, and then you can ask questions as we go along. So Millard, I'm going to put up the contract.
Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically read through the contract and stop when we get to blank areas or try to explain a certain area. And do stop me if you have a question. And also, Liz, if you don't agree with me, you stop me, because there's certain reasons that I want the buyer or the seller to do a certain thing, and I'd like to explain it.
Okay, cool. All right, go for it. I'll keep my mouth.
Okay, well, we'll start with number one, the parties, the buyers. I got Joe Blow and seller John Smith. It's pretty self-explanatory. A, party defined as buyers and sellers. Party defined as both the buyer and the seller. B, brokers are licensed, South Carolina brokers in charge. Their association, real estate license, and sub-agents. You know, basically they're just saying that we're real estate agents in this thing. And C, there's going to be a closing attorney. Has to be a licensed South Carolina attorney by the buyer to coordinate the transaction and the closing. And I got, in this next line, you would put weeks, or if they don't know who their closing attorney is going to be, to be determined, which is the same as you would do on your residential contract. The effective date is the date that that everybody has signed off and agreed on, and everything is initialed on the contract, which is it's the same thing as on the residential as well. The business day, 24-hour period. Obviously, it runs Monday through Friday. It does not include Saturday and Sunday or any holidays. It runs from 10 o'clock in the morning to 9:59 the next day. They have 10 a.m. But
what's interesting about that, Millard, is the fact that our subject to financing contract is all calendar days, and this one's still business days.
Exactly.
Good point.
And so, all right, then I'm going to drop it. Let's see, the closing date. Obviously, it's a stated date and a notice of delivery date. And there again, we're back to the business days shall begin or end, including Saturday and Sunday. Wait a minute, let me be sure I read this right. Business days shall not begin or include any Saturday. Yes, that's what I just said, or federal holidays. Good funds, obviously, are how they're paying for it. And the time, I think everybody knows what time is of the essence means. Obviously, it means it has to be done in that certain amount of time, and that's important that it get done during that period of time. Then you've got the two boxes that you would check to if the buyer or the seller happens to be a real estate agent. And most cases, y'all won't be using this. I have to use it a lot because when I buy stuff, I have to identify that I have my license so that the seller will not, so that, how do I say it? So that I'm protected because I obviously know more than what the seller is, and that also forces the seller's agent to work a little bit harder and to explain to his people that, what I'm up to. I explain it to them. Did I word that correctly, Liz? All right. Purchase price. I think everybody knows what the purchase price is, but if you are doing acreage and not a lot, and let's just say that in MLS, they have 2.5 acres for sale at such and such a location. You want to put 2.5, you want to put that in, and you also want to put that they're buying 2.5 acres plus or minus for such and such a price. And I'll explain to you why farther on. And well, I'll just tell you right now, because then when they do a survey, if the seller thinks he's got 2.5 acres and all of a sudden he's got 3 acres, he's going to want to prorate and get a little bit more money. And if he's got fewer acres, at least you've got him locked in at a price. And as a buyer, you can go back and renegotiate where it makes it uncomfortable for the seller to try to ask for more money.
So you would put on that line, Millard, on that purchase price line?
I wouldn't put it on that line, but what I did in there is I reminded myself in there that the purchase price, for example, if they had, let's say that he was advertising 2.5 acres for $250,000, and I would put $250,000, and there used to be a place on here where you could put down so much per acre, but they don't have this on this new contract. So I would put that plus or minus acre somewhere farther down where there's a line where maybe in 33, I would explain that, which I'm jumping way ahead, but we'll get to it. But where they have the attachments and other contingencies at that point, I would put in there. Definitely, though, that somewhere in this offer, that the price is for that amount of acreage plus or minus. In other words, that way, if he's got 2 acres, you're paying less money. But if he's got more acreage, you're still locked in at that price because it's it. So,
Millard, is this where you would deal with Highland acres, dollars per Highland acre, or would you do that later on?
If I was going to do just so much for highland acres, which we're going to get to farther down when we do a survey and get to the wetland part of this contract, I would put it on there that.
Would you like to leave a message?
Can you just tell me that Mary Perry stopped by?
I have to mute.
Okay.
Somebody's
Just
got
to say thank you very much. She's helped our daughter and son-in-law buy their home.
Something happened to me. I lost everybody. Can y'all hear me again now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Actually, yes, I think I would.
Absolutely.
Pate,
Somebody getting a phone call or something?
Somebody's talking.
it's Pate. Pate, can you mute yourself, please?
Sure.
Hit mute.
I'll mute her.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Liz. You know, it's a good point. I think I would put purchase price such and such and such, and if you were going to say per high acre. But the only time you're going to be able to do that is if you're buying development property. Because if somebody is selling a waterfront lot, and there again they've got 2.5 acres, and only a half acre is highland, which is pretty common, enough space for their home to be on there, then they want it for the property. They don't want it for the high acre. They're not concerned about how much of it's wet. You're paying for that view anyway. So I think the only time that really would come into effect is if you were selling a development tract of land.
So Millard, I have a question for you. Do sellers look at this contract before they sign it? And if I were to say, $250,000 for 2.5 acres plus or minus based on the survey, should I put that on there?
Yeah. But that would be put on there in a different location once we get down to the survey. Because when we get to that survey point, if a seller, when we get to that line, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but when you get to that line about the survey, if a seller says he's got 2.5 acres, I'm going to ask him to pay for that survey and to provide that, not the buyer. Because why should the buyer do it and then it comes out less acreage, and so the buyer now obviously is not interested? Well, they've just bought a survey for the seller.
Right.
So anyway, where are we going down to the property? Number 3, hereby acknowledging sufficient good contract consideration, mutual promises. Seller will sell and convey the property, and buyer will buy and purchase. This is all pretty much the same as on the residential as well, but they've just replaced it with a parcel of land with the appurtenance, interests, and improvements. Landscape system. Let me see. Seller agrees to maintain and operate property in it. Well, basically what they're saying here, that and this doesn't happen a lot unless there's no personal property normally involved in raw land, unless they're buying a tract of land and the guy's got a tractor or something like that he wants to throw in there, or that the purchaser wants to ask for. And I have never run into anything where we get down here to this condominium and master deed. I have never run into that on any land. I have never run into any future vacation renters, where also the Vacation Rental Act. I think all that is just confusing. It's done by the attorneys, and I think it's just confusing because you're not going to run into that on vacant land. Satellite equipment, roll carts, solar panels, fuel tanks. Now, fuel tanks you're going to run into at nobody wants to buy fuel tanks. They want it off of the property. Also,
What about old sheds or old houses that aren't used?
Well, that's not personal property. An old shed's not personal property. It just happens to be on the property, and you can ask for them to clean it up and take it with them, but
It's just part of the property.
it's part of the property. Exactly,
Gotcha.
It's attached. So, also when you get to this vacant land, unless it's a lot, it may have an address. But normally, now I'm still on number 3. You're going to put in there the lot number, the block number, and the phase number. And the phase number and subdivision are only going to be if it is a lot and not vacant land, and the tax map number. So at this point also, if they have a plat, I would always attach it as part of the contract. Number 4, conveyance and closing possession. I think everybody knows that, but when you do vacant land, where typically on residential, you'll do maybe 2 or 3 days. I'd put 10 days because you're having to deal with permitting or a septic tank or some issue where you're dealing with a government entity. And once you get up close to that closing date, you can apply pressure on the government agency and still be in a contract that you're not having to get an extension on because you've already put that 10 days in there. Let's see, conveyance should be simple made to all easements, reservations, right-of-way, restriction easements. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. If you've got a plat and it shows an easement on there or a right-of-way or a restrictive covenant, I think that's pretty self-explanatory that it's going to convey with the property. Property in a material way to all government statutes, ordinance, rules, permits, and obviously that is shouldn't be confusing to anyone. Okay, let's go to next page. Yeah.
Millard, if you have a property that you're selling and it's a shared easement by the adjacent property,
Sure.
By a different owner, would you need to have anything in writing from that other owner?
No, because it's going to show on the plat that it's a
Okay.
shared easement, and it's
Okay.
also going to be in their deed and your deed.
Good.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's why I'm saying attach a plat to it, because that way your attorney, who a lot of times may not have a survey, and he's just got the deed, the survey or the plat is going to show it on there so that he can bring it to everyone's attention.
Gotcha.
The deed shall be delivered in the place of closing. I'm just reading to myself here a second. Seller agrees to pay all statutory recording. All right, where it says, when we get down where it says seller shall convey possession of a vacant and reasonable clean property, free of debris, along with keys, codes, and remotes, and available documents. This basically does not apply to vacant land. It just applies to maybe lots in a subdivision, say Beresford Hall, where you're going to get the codes to get into gate, and all the HOA fees that are on there. That's what that line is applying to. Number 5, earnest money. I think everybody knows what the earnest money is and how that's paid. If anybody's got any questions, I don't even think I need to go through that paragraph. On the transaction cost, you're not going to get an FHA loan on a vacant lot, so you might as well forget about it. Now, you might get a VA loan if you're a veteran, but I don't even know why they have the FHA in here. It's going to be a conventional, and they're typically going to have to put 20 or 25% down. If they're a veteran, they might can get 100% loan on it, but it's because, and Todd would have to verify this, but it's because it would be going into immediately going into a construction loan.
Can I ask a question? You said they would not be able to, they would have to put down 20% because it's vacant property?
20% minimum, depending on how strong they are at their bank.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's what you said. Thank you.
25%, Heritage Trust is doing them at 20 and 25% if you go with them. But I can tell you BB&T is going to want like 30%. And it's going to have to be within 5 miles of a city limit area. They're not going to finance something out in the middle of Fuji, for example. Different banks have different rules. And but I can tell you that it's going to be 20% minimum.
Prosperity Mortgage doesn't do land. A lot of mortgage companies don't do land. Usually you'll go to a bank for that.
Heritage are the best ones right now as far as for doing lots or vacant land. So unless they're strong people and want to go to their own bank. All right, let's see. We're still on number 6. At closing, seller will pay buyer's transaction costs not to exceed. Vacant land, I've never known a seller to ask somebody to pay for. I've never paid for anybody's closing costs. Let's put it that way on anything that I've ever bought. And I've never asked somebody else to pay for my buyer's side of their closing costs on vacant land. Now, I understand why they do it in residential, and that's because people are approved for so much for their home, and they might not have enough money to get into the house. But you don't run into that when people are buying vacant land. When they're buying vacant land, they've got a little bit more money because they know that they're going to have to put a mobile home on it later or build a house on it or whatever. So, and I don't know that the bank would even go along with that anyway.
Millard, are the closing costs on vacant land significantly different than a residential?
No, they're pretty much the same.
Okay.
Pretty much done exactly the same way. You may have some additional fees that we'll get into farther down in the contract that I won't confuse anybody with right now. But let's see, private public transfer fees at any cost similar to transfer fees, capital contributions, conservancy, estoppel fees, otherwise named. But all these are the same as in residential. And then number 7, the finance. It is, or obviously it's the same block. It's in residential. It is or is not contingent on them obtaining financing. Well, in my opinion, all contracts are contingent on financing because if they don't get the money, they're not going to be able to close. But that's up to Liz whether she agrees with me on that. But
I agree with you. If it's cash contract, then it wouldn't be contingent.
No, well, then you wouldn't have this finance clause in here, though. Anyway, but and on land, you might as well put that they're going to apply for don't go in there and put a 95% loan because they're not going to get that. I can tell you right up front. Put 80% or less.
Millard, the Heritage Trust, I think got bought out by Rev. I'm on their website right now, Rev.
Okay, I don't know
And
that.
Heritage Trust was doing 10% down, and Rev is offering up to 90%, up to 15 acres, no minimum time to build. So I'm not sure if that's really a lot loan or a construction to perm with an open-ended window.
Let me explain that a little bit. That is for existing members. If you go in there and you join, you have to join Heritage or Rev, I guess, since they're what they are now. You have to join them to get a loan. If you're an existing member, you might get a 90% loan, but if you're just joining them just to get that loan, they're not going to give you a 90% loan. They're gonna go with the 80%.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
a year from now, if you wanted to buy something else and you stayed a member, then you probably could get it.
Got it.
So that's kind of a little loophole to get people to get members is what it is. All right, where am I? Finance. So we're going to the next page now. We're going to go to page 3.
Yep.
I believe, yes. Lender subsequently declines to fail approved financing. The buyer shall notify the seller. Well, obviously that first line is the same as in residential. If they're not going to get the loan, they're just saying that you contact the seller's agent or the seller immediately. Inspection rights, buyer and seller, insured inspectors, reasonable reform. Examination record was reasonable. What they're asking here is they're asking that for the seller to allow them to go in and inspect the property and do things on the property, or if you drop on down and you see where I've got this, never know anyone to take the insurance, except they're allowing you, for example, if you're going in to get, let's say DHEC. Let's suppose that these people have a lot out in the country that requires a perk site. And they say, well, we have a letter. Well, yes, they have a letter that it has a perk site, but that perk site may fall up in the front of the property, and these people want to have their home back in the back of the property. So what this is saying is that you're allowed to have your agents, say a soil guy, go in there and test to make sure that you can get a perk site back in the back of the property where your house would be, because you don't want to have a tank there and then just have to pump all the way up front because of the expense that it would be. And that's what they're saying there. And then the next paragraph is they're talking about getting insurance. I've never known anyone to have to get insurance except an engineer to cover their people if they were doing something for a development track or something, that they would cover their surveyors or anyone getting injured on the property while they were in there working for them. So number 9, the appraised value. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, the property's got to appraise for what they're purchasing it for. Number 10, let me read it and see why I got important. Survey, title, examination, elevation, purpose. Oh, okay. This is number 10. Charleston County. This where the arrow is pointing that y'all can't see. Read my writing. It says erosion and accretion. If you've got a waterfront lot or anything now that has wetland on it, the bank is requiring a new survey less than 5 years old because of the erosion and the accretion, which means that you've got to have it surveyed, then you've got to have DHEC or OCRM go out and verify it and sign off on it. Also, Charleston County now, if you go in to apply for a construction license or to put a mobile home or something on a lot and it has wetlands on it, they want that survey also to be less than 5 years old. And they may require for a new wetland survey. I just ran into that recently. We're on just a plain old lot out on Johns Island, and I went in to get a permit to have a double wide moved on it because it had some wetland on it. They made me have it resurveyed and have a new wetland delineation done. So that's what and that's important. So y'all need to remember that on all your contracts. You need to remember that. So survival is the same as unresidential. Due diligence, the due diligence period ends no later than, it depends on the type of property, what I'd put in here. I mean, if it's just a lot, you probably don't need more than 10 business days, 2 weeks. You should be able to find everything else out. If it's vacant land, you may need 45 or 60 days. So it's just depending on the type of property. So, and the reason I'm saying 45 or 60 days is because you may have to hire a soil consultant to go out there, and it may take him 2 to 3 weeks before you can get out there to punch holes around to find out where the areas that are going to perk.
And Millard, I understand DHEC takes a while to get them out too. If you
6 weeks.
Wow.
6 weeks. If you would turn in a permit today, they would tell you that it's going to be 6 weeks before they can get to you. So, and with the city right now, I've got some property on Johns Island that I've been waiting. The city's getting ready. You don't even know about this yet, Liz. The city's buying a park, some property on Johns Island that's going to be a new city park through the Greenbelt money, and I'm the agent on the thing, and they can't even get in front of council to get council to vote to approve it, even though they've got the money and everything is done. They've because they're not meeting. It's crazy. So if you're trying to get something rezoned, you might as well figure on 6 months. I'm just telling you that for information.
So Millard, is there anything that falls outside of due diligence for a vacant land other than the financing and the appraisal?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Let me think about that a second now.
Because I'm thinking you've already mentioned DHEC, you've already mentioned soil consultant and surveys. I'm just thinking, is there anything else in the vacant land that would fall outside of that due diligence?
Absolutely. I would think there's some additional things like land use. Suppose they're buying this piece of property and they want to put a boat storage facility on it, and they want during that due diligence period to have time to go meet with the city or the county
council,
and not council, just the zoning department,
planning and zoning,
and zoning, to see if they're going to agree with it if it goes through.
Excuse me, but these are things that need to be done during the due diligence period.
Absolutely, yes.
The finance
okay.
is the only thing outside of due diligence.
So how do you estimate the due diligence period if you are having to go in front of planning and zoning to rezone from?
Well, you don't estimate that. What you do is you estimate during that due diligence period, you go meet with them and find out if they are in agreement with you or disagreement. If they are in agreement with you, they're going to recommend it. Then you can move forward. But in that contract, on an addendum, you need to put in there that it has to be rezoned to such and such and such and such. But also, if you go to them and they say that they don't think it's going to pass, I can tell you it's not going to pass, because I was on the planning commission, and if they didn't recommend it, we didn't. Mm-hmm. If they said that they didn't recommend it, we always voted against it.
Okay.
So if that tells you anything there, but.
So a 45 to 60 day, you could get you could find that preliminary out.
Well, it depends on the situation and the type of property. I think 45 to 60 days would be on a tract of land, because you've got so much to do. But if you were just buying a lot, for example, and you just wanted to go up, you might not need but 10 days, 10 business days, 2 weeks, because you're going to make a phone call and set an appointment up with Andrella, and then go down there and sit and talk with her. She's going to want you to go in there with the plat and show her the piece of property, and she'll look and see what the zoning is around it. And she'll say, well, yes, I think we would recommend a change, that you can do this. And And if she says no, then I just wouldn't even move forward any farther, because I can tell you they're not going to approve it.
So Millard, I guess you're going to get to it in the next couple of paragraphs, but there's several things where we put specific dates like septic permits or rezoning or whatever. Is your guidance to pick just one big due diligence period and try to scoop all of that into that period rather than having these dates be different for how long?
No, I don't. I don't do it that way. Because I wouldn't want to tie the property up. If it was my client, I wouldn't want their property to be tied up for that long, because it's too easy for people to walk away then. As we get farther down to these things, I'll explain to you why. And also, if you're the buyer's agent, there's certain things that you specifically want done, and during that due diligence period, all you're doing is finding out if it's a potential to have it done. Once you get farther down in this contract, you're going to cover your guy anyway if it's not done.
That's good.
And that way you're not tying these people's property up or making them think you're tying it up to get it done. So let's just move on, and I'll get to, and when we get to it, I can show you where we are. All right, so we're going to what page now? Page 3?
Page 4.
Page 4.
4.
So
Termination.
all right, so all right, well, this first, all right, you want me to drop down to termination? Okay, because I was going to say that this first paragraph, in my opinion, during the due diligence period, to the left here, I wrote that in this morning, where you got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I've got written to the left of that where y'all can't see it, but it says, in my opinion, it doesn't apply. And that's to this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on vacant land. I just haven't ever run into it before. Doing a repair, anything is what it's saying, things like that. So, all right, termination. Here we are again. I've got a contract right now that really surprised me, that a buyer's agent, I haven't turned it in yet because it's the one that we were talking about before on TV before we were on here, that they put in $500. I mean, $500 on a purchase on a house, and but I've always put in there like $100 or $10 or this type of thing. So I think that's pretty much up to the individual and what they think that they can do for their client. If they're working for the seller, try to get the most they can. If they're working for the buyer, the least they can.
It also depends on how many days you're asking for.
Correct. So, I've got one where a guy wanted 90 days, and I told him, I said, well, my mortgage payment's $1,500 a month. Are you willing to pay me $4,500 if I give you the 90 days? And he agreed to it. So, I mean, it's just one of those situations where you have to think through it and use common sense. So, number 13, fire or casualty or injury. I put an X through that, Liz. I hope you're not going to spank me for it, but I've never run across a fire or casualty, situation on vacant land.
I guess it's possible that the woods could catch on fire.
Yeah, I mean, it could, and if that happened, then they can walk. Then the buyer can walk away because they're not delivering the property in the same condition it was when they looked at it.
I don't think you actually exit out when you write the contracts.
No. I'm just saying it doesn't apply. That's why I put that X in there. I wouldn't exit out. I definitely would not exit out in the contract.
Okay.
So, number 14. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It is or it isn't. Contingent on them being able to get the permits that they need. If it's a lot, typically it's a building permit. And if it's vacant land, then it could be, depending on whether it's development property, the permits for them to be able to develop it. So normally if it's a large piece and it's going to be a development tract, you would also attach an addendum applying to number 14, explaining what permits what you're expecting to get.
Tracy's question a while ago, I think, and this makes me think twice about what I said, because I really have always wondered, you've got the due diligence period and then you still have these paragraphs in the contract. So does that mean that these paragraphs are outside of the due diligence, Tracy?
Yes.
So
yes.
Okay.
In my opinion, they are.
I need to ask Byron to absolutely clear that up, but that's a good point. Thank you.
So, I mean, due diligence is over, but still what they're saying is this contract is contingent upon property being rezoned to, let's just say, commercial by full approval with appeal and appropriate authorities no later than, at that point, you'd put in 180 days because you know it's going to take you 6 months right now.
Mm.
So if it doesn't change or doesn't pass, then your client is still protected also because it was not approved.
So that's why you said, I understand better now with this rezoning paragraph, because in the due diligence, a shorter due diligence actually, really the due diligence doesn't have anything to do with the rezoning. And that's what takes so long.
Exactly.
I'm finding out.
Yes.
With all these vacant lands. Okay.
Yes, and you wouldn't put your septic permit to fall in under the due diligence permit either. And I mean, under the due diligence period either, because that falls under number 16.
Okay.
Millard, does a dock permit, in your opinion, fit under 14?
Dock permit under 14.
Question.
Well, if it was dock permit, I would do an addendum and make that a contingency, contingent on getting the dock permit. So I wouldn't let that even be under 15 or 14 or 15 or due diligence or any of them. I would have an addendum at that time attached to it that says that that it's contingent on them having that approval to before they would close.
And what would you recommend?
And I wouldn't put a number of days in there. I wouldn't put a number of days in there. I'd put contingent on them having that permit.
Got it.
Because I mean, now they're requiring you to have a drawing done. You're having a survey done. I mean, to get a dock permit right now is there again, you're pushing it at 90 days. So, well, you wouldn't even get it at 90 days because it's got to be put in the newspaper for 30 days before you got the permit, you fill out the permit, you got to get a surveyor to go in and survey it. Then you have to turn it into DHEC. Then DHEC's going to tell you that you have to advertise it for 30 days. So it has to be advertised for 30 days. And if anybody appeals it, which they have another 30 days to appeal it. So there's just no way, I mean, that you're going to get one in 90 days. It's probably going to take 120 days minimum to get a dock permit right now because everybody's so busy. Plus DHEC's got to go out and look at the property. You're going to have the wetland area redone like we talked about earlier, because it's going to be on a river or a creek. So there's just too much involved. So I would definitely do that in an attachment and not put a day in there.
Okay, thanks.
And number 16, where I've got, I think I said it earlier, get your buyer to do this. And the reason I'm saying that is because of the location of where the property may perk. It may be 5 acres and there's only one location that the property perks and it's all the way up front, but they want their house all the way back in the back. And I can tell you right now, a septic tank is going to cost you $5,400 for is the cheapest you're going to get by. And if they got a pump to it, you can probably double that.
Wow.
So that's why you want to make sure that the septic tank is going to be where their house is, where they're going to want their home.
Hmm.
So let's see. I need to go on down a little bit further. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, we're on 5. Property condition seller, so not wrong. Well, obviously number 17. You know, when you put a piece of property under contract, you're expecting it to be in the same condition that it is when you put the contract there. He can't go in and sell the timber. He can't go in and dig dirt out of it. He can't go in and put a road through it to get back to the back to take some trees out or anything. That basically that's what number 17 is saying.
Go back to 16 and address I kind of talked to you earlier about a lot of agents putting that the property is connected to city water and city sewer.
Oh, okay. That's what I skipped. Yes. All right. We talked about the septic tank on the last page, and this paragraph covers a lot. For example, that where you've got water and sewage. What they're talking about here is somebody's talking. I can't think.
I'm trying to figure out who to mute.
Show Graham on the phone, and then he screwed around because they did specifically say they said like for filing, but now they don't want nobody upstairs.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on up there. They got the judges in there.
Is that somebody talking to me, or I don't know what it is?
I think it's the person on their iPhone.
Yeah, it's the iPhone. Yeah.
I just muted her.
Okay. All right. We're back up on 16 again on that top, the paragraph on page 5, where we're talking about seller represents the property as being connected to the system. Vacant land is never connected to any of these. You've got to pay a tap-in fee. What they're saying is that sewer is available or water is available. I was telling Liz I just paid $2,500 yesterday for a tap-in fee through CPW for a lot over on Johns Island, and I don't know what the sewage is off the top of my head, but that's what that's referring to. It's never connected when it's vacant land. It just means that it's available there, and you're going to check the box, and this customary tap-in fee not to exceed. So that's between you and your buyer. But if it's $2,500 for water, I'd say sewage is probably going to be another $1,500 to $2,000.
The important part here too is just don't ever say it's connected, because I see a lot of these land contracts that say it's connected to city water. It's not connected. It's available, but it's not connected. Yeah. Thank you.
So, is that what we wanted to say? All right. I mean, I covered that all right. So I think I jumped to 17. Did I? Yeah, we finished with 17. All right, we're on 18, residential property condition disclosure. All right. Property disclosures on vacant land, I don't ever fill them out unless it is a commercial piece, because the bank is going to require you to get a phase 1 before they're going to loan money on it. And a phase 1 means that, for example, something down on Spruill Avenue where they had hazardous waste down there all the way back to World War II. And the phase 1 shows what was on the property and what was done. And if the phase 1 does not come back clean, let's say it shows that it had fuel tanks on it, then they'll require a phase 2, which is where they go in and do the borings and all that type of thing. So unless it's commercial property, you don't really do a property disclosure. And lead-based paint, I got an X through it. Don't X through it on the contract, but it doesn't apply. Sex offenders, the same as on all of them. The trust and interest is the same as on the residential. So let's see. Let's go down to rollback taxes. I think everything's self-explanatory till we get to rollback taxes. The only time rollback taxes come into effect is if you are changing the usage on a piece of property. And if it's residential right now and they are going to change the usage of the property to commercial, then they are going to go back 5 years and roll the taxes back and charge either the buyer or the seller at closing the additional taxes that should have been put on the property. Now, did I word that to where everybody understands that? Okay. Or should I use an example?
So Millard, the question is, what if they don't change the use for a while? It's use, not zoning, right? So the zoning.
Well, when you change the zoning, you're changing the usage.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
okay.
Not necessarily. If it's vacant land and it's going to be developed commercially, but it's still vacant land until that point. I mean,
well, then they don't.
Qualifies for ag, for example, then it's only when the use actually changes. Is that your understanding?
Yes, and let me tell you, if you buy it right now as vacant land and you own that property for 2 or 3 years, and then at that time you decide you want to develop it, so you're changing the usage of that property, even though you're the owner, you're changing the usage of that property. When you go to pay your impact fees, they're going to charge you rollback taxes at that time.
Right.
Did that come out to where you understood it?
It's really significant. If people haven't dealt with it before, it's the difference between that $50 a year ag taxes and $5,000 a year commercial taxes for 5 years.
Well, I can give you an example. When I sold that tract of land to Pulte over on Johns Island, the impact fees were $750,000 and the rollback taxes were over $100,000.
Wow.
And that was on 350-acre land on Johns Island where they were going to put in 1,100 homes.
Wow.
So it is significant. And anytime you have a tract of land that somebody's wanting to develop, they're always going to try to get the seller to pay it. Okay. The buyers just, for some reason, just never want to end up having to pay it. And 90% of the time, all these D.R. Hortons or any of them that are buying land are going to require the seller. So you make sure that your seller is covered for that and knows about it and knows how much it's going to be. And you can call the county and they'll give you a breakdown on approximately what it's going to be.
Typically on subdivision lots, this is not anything you have to worry about, but you still check a box. Because it's got 2 boxes there.
Correct. Oh yeah, you have to check a box. Yes. Even and you can explain to your seller or to your buyer, go ahead and check the box. I know you're the buyer, but check the box that you're going to pay those rollback taxes because it'll make the seller feel more comfortable, but because there's not going to be any rollback taxes. I mean, that's kind of what I tell them all the time, or the seller,
If you're buying a lot in a subdivision.
Yes, correct. So, all right. Next, we cover that enough for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
All right, number 24, special studies. Let me see why I put my note there. I can't read the screen, so I got to read my paperwork, all reports and certifications, lender, buyer, government concerning special. Oh, okay. The reason I got seller and seller in here is because of what I went over earlier where I was talking about somebody doing a survey on a piece of property and having that 5 years in there and the wetlands have changed during that period of time, or the bank has changed on the creek or on the river. The seller should have all that, and there's no reason why your buyer should have to go in sorry, where your buyer should have to go in. Cut that off for me. And you ignore.
I love it.
Sorry. Where your buyer should have to go in and have all that done and then turn it over to the seller. So unless it's a large tract of land that some people that has been in the family for years and now a developer wants to buy the piece of property, then at that point you'd make the developer pay for it. But even in the contract at that point, I would require the developer to turn all the work over to me that he's had the engineer do or the surveyors or any of that if they don't buy the property, so that you have it for the next purchaser. So, but if it's just something small like 2.5 acres or 3 acres that they're trying to sell that's on the water, then they should already have all that done for you. And they are in a position to be able to apply pressure on DHEC to get it done in a timely fashion, more than a seller can. So, all right. I have the X on that upon delivered notice. I have an X across that again. Don't exit on the contract, but it really never comes up. That's why I did it. Obviously, number 25 is just like any of the others, entire agreement, the adjustments.
Millard, I think pretty much all the rest of this is like our subject defined.
Yeah.
So you can skip over.
Exactly.
33.
33.
Attachments.
Okay, I've got a note on mine that I guess that I put down this morning and not yesterday, and it says if there is an updated plat. Oh, yes. This in here is where I would put in there about seeing the attachment of the plat, or making the plat part, naming the plat A1 or something like that, and putting in there see attachment A1 and attaching the plat. Is what I'm trying to say, if it came out properly as part of the document. Does anybody understand what I just said? If there's a plat to the property, what I would do at this point, I would write on that line, see attachment A1, and I would write on the plat A1 and circle it, so that would be the attachment, rather than using this 390 or 391. Because none of those are going to cover the actual plat. Those are different attachments that you can use that typically you don't, but you can use them, that are forms that they already put out for you.
Saying, Millard, for example, if you wanted to do get a dock permit, you would maybe attach a general addendum that addressed the dock permit.
I would use a regular addendum, yes, ma'am, and that's where I would put down there contingent on them receiving a dock permit. Yeah. And I don't know which one of those numbers it is, but that's what I would use. The basic addendum 1, I think, is what it's called, across the top of it. But and that's where I would put see the addendum 1 or see attachment such and such, and that's what those lines are for. So then we go to notice of delivery is the same. 35, responsible for obtaining legal advice, pretty much the same. Expiration of the offer, that's the same. Everything on this page is the same on residential.
Be sure to include the notice addresses for the agents. Is what goes there.
Yes. Yes. And then this next one, if you don't want to get your hand spanked, you fill this page out definitely, where you've got the buyer and the seller's agent and their license number, Liz's license number, notice address, and all that. If there's an issue, that's the first thing that the attorney or whatever is going to ask for. They're going to want to see if that's on the contract.
Excellent.
Noah, if you represent the buyer, do you try to negotiate some sort of reimbursement from the seller for reports, plats?
No.
Whatever.
No, because they've tied up the people's property, and they're not purchasing it. So the seller is due something. So you're giving them the plats that you've spent money on, the engineering work that you spent money on, and all that. I mean, you're talking about quite a bit of money. There's one on Johns Island that I was trying to do that the guy wanted to put a car wash in, and it was contingent on getting all these permits. He spent $26,000 in engineering and everything else, and couldn't get it approved, so he had to give it to the guy whose property he had tied up for 6 months. But at least the guy had new survey and new.
When you say had to, because
he had to, because I had it in the contract.
It was written into the contract.
Yes.
Yes. No, just to be specific, it's not in the boilerplate. It was added by the agents.
It was added by me, and he wasn't going to get his earnest money back from the attorney that was holding it until he provided those documents.
Okay.
So, Millard, I have a question. As an agent representing your buyer, you have these dock permits sometimes that have expiration dates on them, and other permits that come with the property, but they have an expiration date within the year or a year out. How do you protect your buyer in that situation?
Well, if it's a year out, then you renew it at that point and put it in there. But you're getting on a sticky situation here, unless you want to put in there that they must update it. Be able to update the permit, because the dock permits now, they used to be good forever, and then they said, all right, now they're good for 5 years with a 2-year extension, and then they said no, they're good for 3 years with two-year extensions. So all this depends on what permit they have. But if it's within 12 months and they're not planning on building that dock within 12 months, it needs to be updated. But I will tell you this also, between you and I, and this is not to be used, this is just knowledge. If they go out there and put 5 pilings in and it expires in 6 months, they're good for 2 more years, because they've
automatically extended.
Yeah, because they've started construction on it. Because they're going to have to pull a permit, and that permit's going to have the date. The construction permit's going to have the date on it. So they've got 2 years to complete it. So that is one little kind of loophole to get around sometimes. But if I had one that was going to expire in 6 months and I noticed that, I'd make sure it was updated first. I wouldn't worry about putting the pilings in. I'd get it updated.
Anybody have questions for Millard? I've unmuted everybody, so you should be able to speak up. Well, Millard, thank you so much. This was outstanding. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me do it.